Welcome to my Channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. The receipt was still warm when I pulled it from the printer. November 3rd, 2024. 11:47 p.m. That's what it said at the top. But I'd been standing in my apartment in Portland, Oregon, just seconds ago. Now I was here, in a blockbuster video that shouldn't exist. The fluorescent lights hummed that specific frequency you only heard in the 90s. You know the one, that barely there buzz that made your teeth ache if you paid too much attention to it. The smell hit me next. Plastic cases, carpet cleaner, that weird popcorn butter they used to pump through the vents even though they never actually sold popcorn. I looked down at the receipt again, my hands were shaking. Late fee due, $47,192.50. Days overdue, 8,743. Title, The Ring, 2002. But here's the thing that made my blood turn to ice water. I'd never rented the Ring. Never even had a Blockbuster card. Before you click away thinking this is just another nostalgia trip gone wrong, let me tell you what happened next. Because if you've ever gotten a call from a number that doesn't exist, if you've ever found a VHS tape in your streaming-era apartment, if you've ever woken up at 3:33 a.m. to the sound of tracking static from a TV you don't own, then you need to hear this. And if you haven't, well, after tonight you might. Comment below if you remember the last movie you ever rented. I dare you to check if you returned it. The story begins now. 3 days earlier, I was just Marcus Chen, 32, software developer, living my unremarkable life in a converted loft in southeast Portland. The kind of guy who meal prepped on Sundays and had a favorite coffee shop where the barista knew my order. Normal. Boring, even. The package arrived on Halloween night. I almost didn't answer the door. Kids had been ringing the bell all evening, and I'd run out of candy 2 hours ago. But this knock was different. 3 slow, deliberate raps. Not the excited hammering of trick-or-treaters. The delivery guy wore a uniform I didn't recognize. Navy blue with yellow trim, no company logo, just a name tag that said Randy in that distinctive Blockbuster font I hadn't seen in over a decade. Marcus Chen? His voice sounded like he'd been gargling gravel. Yeah? Sign here. He held out one of those old carbon copy forms. The kind where you had to press really hard with the pen to make it go through all 3 sheets. What is this? Return. That's all he said. Return. The package was heavier than it looked. About the size of a shoebox, wrapped in brown paper that felt wrong. Too smooth. Too cold. Like it had been sitting in a freezer. I should have refused it. Should have asked more questions. But Randy was already walking back to his van. An honest-to-God Ford Aerostar with wood paneling on the sides. The kind of van that died out with the video stores. Inside my apartment, I set the package on my kitchen counter and grabbed a beer. The return address made me pause. Blockbuster Video Store, number 2847, 1247, Morrison, St. Portland, or 97205, that address. I knew that address. It was a Whole Foods now. Had been for at least 15 years. I peeled back the brown paper carefully. Inside was a blue and yellow plastic case. A VHS case. But not just any VHS. The cover was blank. Completely white except for a small label stuck to the spine. Handwritten in blue ballpoint pen. Overdue. Final notice. My phone rang. Unknown number with a 503 area code. Hello? Static. But not just static. That specific sound of a VHS tape rewinding. That mechanical whir that started slow, sped up in the middle, then slowed again at the end. Hello? I said again. Please be kind." The voice was barely a whisper. Rewind. The line went dead. I sat there for a long moment, beer forgotten, staring at that VHS case. Every rational part of my brain said to throw it away. Take it to the dumpster. Hell, burn it if I had to. But you know that feeling when you're standing at the edge of a cliff? Your brain screams at you to step back, but some primitive part of you whispers, "Jump." That's what I felt holding that case. I opened it. The tape inside was pristine, like it had just come off the factory line. The label was different from the case, though. This one was printed professional looking. Property of Blockbuster Video Customer Copy. Do not remove late fees. Apply after 11:59 p.m. I didn't own a VCR. Haven't owned one since college. But this is where it gets weird. Weirder, I mean. I blinked, and there was a VCR on my TV stand, not a modern one. A massive silver Panasonic from the mid-90s with about 40 unnecessary buttons on the front. The kind where you had to program the clock every time the power went out, and it always flashed 12 o'clock. If you didn't. It was already plugged in, already connected to my 65-inch Samsung. The clock wasn't flashing. It showed 11:47 p.m., but my phone said 9:15 p.m. I put the tape in. I had to. You understand that, right? Sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes the story has already started, and you're just catching up to where you're supposed to be. The VCR made that satisfying chunk sound as it accepted the tape. The TV turned on by itself. Static filled the screen, but not regular static. It moved wrong, swirled, like something was trying to push through from the other side. Then the tracking adjusted itself, and I was watching me, but not current me, 8-year-old me, in my childhood living room in Beaverton. I was sitting too close to the TV, cross-legged on that ugly brown carpet Mom refused to replace, watching something, leaning forward like kids do when they're completely absorbed. The camera angle was impossible. It was filming from inside the TV, looking out at little me. Young Marcus reached forward and pressed his hand against the screen. "I want to return it," he whispered. "Please, I want to return it." The tape ejected itself. My apartment was completely dark. The beer on my counter had gone warm. According to my phone, it was now 11:46 p.m. I'd lost over 2.5 hours. The VCR was gone. But the tape sat on my coffee table, rewound and ready. Next to it was something that hadn't been there before. A laminated Blockbuster membership card with my name on it. The photo was me at 8 years old. The expiration date was tomorrow's date. And written in pen across the bottom, 1 rental remaining. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that rewind sound. That mechanical whir that seemed to come from inside my skull. At 3:33 a.m., and I know it was exactly 3:33 because I'd been staring at my phone. The TV turned on again. No VCR this time. Just my regular Samsung showing what looked like security camera footage. Grainy. Black and white. The timestamp in the corner read NOV2 2024 03:33:33. It was the inside of a video store. Empty. Lights on, but nobody home. Rows and rows of videos stretched back further than should have been possible. The camera slowly panned across the store, and I realized with a cold certainty that this wasn't recorded. This was live. Something moved in the comedy section. The camera didn't zoom. It physically moved, like someone was carrying it. Walking slowly down the main aisle, past action-adventure, past drama, past the little kiddie section with the beanbag chairs that I suddenly remembered even though I'd never been to this particular store. The figure in comedy wasn't hiding. It stood at the end of the aisle facing the camera. Waiting. It was Randy, the delivery driver, but his uniform was different now. Older. The fabric looked stiff, like it had been soaked in something and dried repeatedly. His name tag was the same, but underneath Randy was a new line. Employee since 1987. He held up a VHS case. Even in the grainy footage, I could read the title, The Ring. "You rented this," he said. His voice came through my TV speakers, tinny and distorted. "October 31st, 2000. You were 8. "No," I said to my empty apartment. "No, I didn't." "Cedar Hills Blockbuster, your mother's account. She let you pick one movie for Halloween." He opened the case, empty. "You never returned it." The memory hit me like ice water. Mom rushing me out of the store, me clutching that case. We'd watched it that night. No, that wasn't right. The Ring came out in 2002. I couldn't have rented it in 2000. "Time works different here," Randy said, like he could hear my thoughts. "We have movies that haven't been made yet. Movies that never got made. Movies that shouldn't exist." He gestured to the shelves around him. "We have them all, and they all have late fees." The camera moved on its own, turning to show the new releases wall. Every single case showed the same thing. My face. Different ages. 8, 15, 21. Current me. Older versions I hadn't lived yet. All with the same title, Overdue. "The store closes tomorrow," Randy continued. "Permanently. All accounts must be settled. All items must be returned." "I don't have the movie," I shouted at the TV. "I was 8. It was 24 years ago." "Every rental exists somewhere," Randy said. He pointed to something off camera. "You just have to know where to look." The TV shut off. I sat in the dark, breathing hard. This was insane, impossible. But that membership card sat on my coffee table, catching the streetlight from my window. Real as anything. I picked it up. The back had text I hadn't noticed before. Fine print, terms and conditions. But one line stood out, handwritten in that same blue pen. "Present this card at any location to access your account." Any location. I grabbed my jacket and keys. It was almost 4 a.m., but I had to know. The address from the package. 11247 Morrison. The Whole Foods. The streets were empty. Portland at 4 a.m. on a Sunday feels like a different city. Like everyone else evacuated and forgot to tell you. The Whole Foods loomed dark, its windows reflecting the streetlights like dead eyes. I parked and walked to the entrance. Obviously closed. But where the automatic doors met, there was a gap. Not a normal gap. A vertical line of pure darkness about an inch wide. Like someone had taken a razor to reality itself. I held up the membership card. The gap widened. Just enough for a person to squeeze through. The darkness inside wasn't the absence of light. It was deeper than that. The kind of dark that makes you understand why primitive humans feared the night. But I could hear something in there. That fluorescent hum. That specific frequency. I stepped through. The lights came on in sections, like dominoes. Thunk, thunk, thunk. Revealing exactly what I expected and feared. A perfect blockbuster video. Every detail exactly right. The wire racks with microwave popcorn nobody ever bought. The cardboard standee for a movie I didn't recognize. Something called The Last Customer, starring nobody I'd ever heard of. The drop box by the entrance with its metal mouth hungry for returns. "Welcome back, Marcus." I spun around. A woman stood behind the counter, late 30s, early 40s maybe. Blockbuster polo shirt tucked into khakis, name tag. Sarah, manager, member since forever. "I need to return something," I said. "I know." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. They were flat, glassy, like a doll's eyes. "But first, you need to understand the late fee." She turned the computer monitor toward me. It was one of those ancient CRT monitors, the screen curved and flickering slightly. The text was green on black, like something from the first Matrix movie. Account: Chen Marcus joined. 10/31/2000. Current rentals. One title: The Ring, 2002. Due date: 11/07/2000. Days overdue: 8,743. Late fee: 47,892.50. That's impossible, I said. The dates don't make sense. Time works different here, Sarah said, echoing Randy. We exist in the spaces between, the closed stores, the forgotten accounts, the unreturned memories. Memories? She gestured to the store around us. Every movie is a memory, Marcus. Every rental is a piece of time you borrowed. Some people return them, some don't, and some... She leaned forward. Some can't, because they borrowed something that wasn't meant to be taken. Sarah led me deeper into the store, past the new releases, past the regular sections, to a door marked Employees Only, that I somehow knew had always been there and had never been there until this moment. You want to know why you specifically got the notice, she said. It wasn't a question. The door opened to a hallway that couldn't exist. The Whole Foods wasn't this big, the building wasn't this big, but here we were walking down a corridor lined with more doors. Each one had a small placard. Returns 1987-1990. Damaged goods. Never rented. Should have been destroyed. We stopped at one labeled Permanent Collection. Every Blockbuster had one, Sarah said, her hand on the doorknob. Movies that weren't really movies. They looked like movies. Had covers, barcodes, everything. But they were doors, windows, connections to the spaces between spaces. She opened the door. The room beyond was impossible. Infinite rows of shelves stretching up and up and up, disappearing into darkness. Each shelf held hundreds of VHS tapes, all in those blue and yellow cases. But these weren't movies I recognized. The titles were wrong. The Day That Never Ended. Sarah's Last Shift. The Customer Who Stayed. Your movie, she said. The Ring. It wasn't supposed to be in the regular inventory. It was supposed to be here. Safe. Contained. But sometimes... She pulled a tape from a nearby shelf. The case showed a family of 4, all with their faces blurred out. Sometimes they escape, find their way to the wrong shelves, get rented by the wrong people. I was 8, I said. I didn't know. No, but your mother did. Sarah's expression changed. Something like sympathy crossed her face. She worked here, Marcus, 1907 to 91. She knew about the permanent collection, knew what these movies really were. The memory hit me again, clearer this time. Mom in a Blockbuster uniform I'd forgotten she'd ever worn. Mom with access to sections regular employees couldn't enter. Mom who quit suddenly one day and never said why. She tried to protect you, Sarah continued. Took that tape home to destroy it. But you found it first, watched it while she was at her new job, and once you watch something from the permanent collection... What? I asked, though I already knew. You become part of it. The movie keeps a piece of you, and you keep a piece of the movie. That's the real late fee, Marcus, not money. Time, memory, pieces of yourself you don't even know are missing. She led me to a specific shelf. My name was on a small label. Below it, dozens of tapes, all with the same title. Marcus Chen, age 8 to 32. Every day since you watched it, Sarah explained. The movie has been recording you, storing you, building its collection. And tomorrow, when the last Blockbuster closes for real, all those pieces become permanent inventory. What does that mean? Sarah pulled one of the tapes from my shelf. The case showed me at 15, standing in front of my high school. But I wasn't alone. There was something behind me, slightly out of focus, a shadow that didn't match my position. It means you stay here, in the spaces between, neither returned nor rented, just archived. I thought about running, but where would I go? We were in a Blockbuster that existed in a Whole Foods that was closed. Reality had already broken. The normal rules didn't apply. There has to be a way out, I said. There is. Sarah walked to another section. This one was different. The tapes here were in red cases instead of blue. The return policy. But it's not what you think. She handed me a red case. The cover was blank except for 2 words. Final notice. You can't return the movie you rented, she said, because that movie doesn't exist anymore. It's become part of you, woven into your timeline, but you can return something else. What? The years between. The time you borrowed without knowing. Every day since October 31st, 2000. She opened the case. Inside was a tape, but the tape was transparent. I could see through it, and in the clear plastic, images moved. My life, college, first job, first apartment, friends, relationships, everything that happened after that Halloween night. If I return this, you go back, 8 years old again. November 1st, 2000, the day after Halloween. But this time, the movie was never rented. Your mother never worked here. The permanent collection never touched your life. I'd lose 24 years. You'd trade them, the late fee for time, the time for freedom. Sarah's doll eyes reflected the fluorescent lights. But you have to decide before the store closes. Tomorrow, 11:59 p.m. A phone rang somewhere in the store. That old electronic trill that no phone makes anymore. Sarah's expression changed. You need to go. Now. Why? What's... The lights started shutting off. Section by section. Thunk. 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 But in reverse now, darkness racing toward us. Other customers are coming, Sarah whispered. The ones who never left. The ones who've been browsing for decades. Run, Marcus. Take the tape and run. I grabbed the transparent VHS and ran. Through the door, down the impossible hallway, past sections that hadn't been there before. Customers who stayed too long. Employees who never clocked out. The final rental. Behind me, I could hear them. Footsteps that weren't quite right. Too many feet, or not enough. And voices, discussing movies that never existed in words that weren't quite English. The main store was dark except for the emergency exits signs, casting everything in that hellish red glow. But the entrance, the gap in reality, it was getting smaller. I squeezed through just as it sealed completely. The Whole Foods parking lot. 5:47 a.m. The sky just starting to lighten in the east. My car sat alone under a streetlight, covered in dew like it had been there all night. In my hand, the transparent tape. Still impossible. Still showing my life playing out in fast-forward through the clear plastic. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You have 18 hours to decide. Present your membership card at any location to complete your return. Thank you for choosing Blockbuster. I spent the day trying to live normally. Went to my coffee shop, ordered my usual. But the barista didn't recognize me. Said I looked familiar but couldn't place from where. You remind me of someone, she said, squinting. A kid who used to come in here with his mom. Years ago. But that doesn't make sense. It was already starting, the unraveling. The store pulling at the threads of my existence. By noon, 3 of my coworkers had forgotten my name. By 3 p.m., my apartment building's doorman asked to see ID. By 5, my best friend since college texted asking if we'd met before. I was being erased from the outside in, or maybe from the inside out. Hard to tell when reality itself was having a dispute with a video store that shouldn't exist. I sat in my apartment, watching the transparent tape play my life in the dying light. There was so much I'd forgotten. Good moments, bad ones. That time I got food poisoning in Vegas and thought I was dying. The night I met Jennifer and fumbled my words so badly she laughed for 5 minutes straight. My first coding job where I deleted the entire database on day 3. 24 years of mistakes and miracles, all for the low price of $47,819.50 in late fees. My phone rang. Mom. Marcus? Her voice was strange, uncertain. I had the strangest dream about you. You were 8 years old, and we were in a video store, and I was trying to tell you something important, but I couldn't remember what. Mom, I said, do you remember working at Blockbuster? Silence long enough that I checked to see if the call had dropped. How do you know about that? She whispered. I found something out about a movie I rented when I was 8. No. The word came out sharp, frightened. No, you didn't rent anything. I made sure. I kept you away from that section. I burned my employee ID. I never let you have a membership card. Mom, I did rent something. Halloween 2000. The Ring. She made a sound I'd never heard from her before. Part sob, part laugh, part something else. That's not possible, she said. The ring didn't exist in 2000. I know because I tried to prevent it. That movie, it was in the permanent collection. A movie about a tape that kills you in 7 days, but it wasn't supposed to be made until 2002. It was a temporal paradox, a film that inspired its own existence. You knew what those movies were. I found out too late, after I'd already been there 2 years. The manager before Sarah, he told me the truth, about the spaces between, about what Blockbuster really was, not just a video store, a repository, a place where abandoned timelines and forgotten futures were stored. Why didn't you quit immediately? Another long pause. Because, once you know, you can't unknow. And they needed employees who understood, to keep things contained, to make sure the wrong movies didn't get into the wrong hands. But then I got pregnant with you, and I realized I couldn't risk it. Couldn't risk you getting exposed to that place. But I did get exposed. I know, she said. I've known for 24 years. That's why I've been paying. What? The late fees, Marcus. Who do you think has been keeping them at bay? Every month I go to a place that doesn't exist and pay what I can. Not money, memories. Little pieces of myself. The day you were born, your first word, your college graduation. I give them up and they give you more time. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. But I'm running out of memories to trade, she continued. And now they want the principal, not just the interest. I looked at the transparent tape in my hand, thought about what Sarah had offered. Return the years, go back, start over. Mom, I said, what if I could fix this? You can't. Once you've watched something from the permanent collection, I could return the time. Go back to being 8, the day after Halloween. No, the word was fierce. No, Marcus, those 24 years. That's your life, your real life. Every moment, every choice, every mistake and triumph. You don't trade that away. Then what do I do? She was quiet for a moment, then, you become the last customer. What? Every store needs a final transaction. Someone to turn off the lights, lock the doors, end the story. If you become the last customer, if you're there when it finally closes, you can set the terms. How do you know? Because I've been researching for 24 years. Reading every terms of service, every employee handbook, every corporate memo that leaked from the spaces between. There's always a final customer, and they always get to make one last deal. I looked at my phone. 8:47 p.m. 3 hours and 12 minutes until the deadline. "Where are you?" I asked. "Outside your building. I've been here since you called. I didn't know if I'd still remember you by the time I got to your door." I ran downstairs. She was there, sitting in her old Honda, looking exactly the same except for her eyes. They were older, tired, like someone who'd been paying interest on a debt for decades. "Show me your membership card," she said. I handed it to her. She studied it under the dome light, running her fingers over the lamination. "This is real," she said. "This makes you a legitimate customer, with all the rights and privileges that entails." She handed it back, including the right to one final rental. "I don't understand. The store closes at 11:59, but customers inside can stay until they've finished browsing. It's in the corporate policy, page 247, subsection 18C. No customer shall be forced to leave before completing their transaction. So I go in but don't leave. You go in and you rent one last movie, something from the permanent collection, something that matters." She reached into her purse and pulled out a VHS case I hadn't seen in over 2 decades. This one. The cover showed our family. Me, her, and Dad before the divorce. Standing in front of a Blockbuster, all smiling. The title read, "The Life We Were Supposed to Have." "This doesn't exist," I said. "It does in there. Every possible timeline, every choice unmade, every path not taken, they're all in the permanent collection." She pressed the case into my hands. "Rent this one, watch it. And when it ends, when it asks if you want to rewind, say no. What happens if I don't rewind? The movie stays at its ending, and so do you. Outside the loop, free from the collection." She touched my face. "It's the only way to pay a debt to a place that exists outside of time. You give it an ending it can keep." My phone buzzed. 11 p.m., 1 hour. "Go," she said. "I'll be here when you get back. If you get back, if there's a here to get back to." I drove to the Whole Foods. The Gap was already there, wider this time. Wide enough to walk through without squeezing, like it was expecting me. Inside, the Blockbuster was fully lit but empty. No Sarah, no Randy, no other customers browsing the aisles. Just me and thousands of movies that shouldn't exist. I walked to the permanent collection door. It was already open. The infinite shelves stretched upward. But now I could see the top, could see where they ended. Because the store was ending. Reality was sealing the edges, closing the spaces between. I found it quickly. The life we were supposed to have. Right where Mom said it would be. Between the day Marcus wasn't born and the timeline where we stayed. The front counter was abandoned, but the register was on. Waiting. I scanned my membership card, then the movie. The computer made that satisfied beep of a successful transaction. Rental period. Until the end, late fees. Not applicable. Thank you for choosing Blockbuster. A VCR had appeared on the counter, already connected to a small TV that definitely hadn't been there before. I inserted the tape. Static. Then, life, but different. Dad never left, Mom never worked at Blockbuster. I never rented the ring. We were normal, happy, boring in all the right ways. I watched myself grow up different. More confident, less haunted. Went to different schools, made different friends, became someone else entirely. The tape ran for what felt like hours, but the clock never moved. 11:47 p.m. the entire time. Until, finally, it showed all three of us, current day, having dinner. Laughing about something I couldn't quite hear. Dad's hair gray now. Mom's eyes without that tired weight. Me without the shadow that had followed me for 24 years. The screen went blue, the universal signal for end of tape. Text appeared. Please be kind. Rewind? I reached for the VCR. My finger hovered over the rewind button. No, I said. The lights went out, all at once, thunk, but I could still see the TV. The blue screen. The text changed. Thank you for visiting Blockbuster. The last customer receives 1 courtesy. I want the late fees forgiven, I said to the darkness. All of them, for everyone. Every person who never returned a tape. Every customer who owes something to the spaces between. Clear the accounts. The TV flickered. New text. That's not how business works. You're not a business anymore, I said. You're a memory, and memories should be free. Silence. Darkness. Then, impossibly, laughter. Sarah's voice from everywhere and nowhere. Corporate approved your request. All accounts cleared. All debts forgiven. All tapes returned. The TV turned off. The VCR disappeared. And I was standing in a Whole Foods at 11:59 p.m., holding nothing but a membership card to a store that no longer existed. I walked out through the automatic doors that opened normally, got in my car, drove home. Mom was still there, but her eyes were different, younger, like someone who'd just remembered 24 years of memories she'd traded away. Is it done? She asked. I handed her the membership card. It was blank now, just gray plastic, nothing on it at all. It's done. We sat there in the car for a while, not talking, just existing in a world where Blockbuster was finally, truly closed. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. But this time it wasn't threatening. Just 2 words. Be kind. I deleted it, blocked the number, and went upstairs to my apartment that everyone suddenly remembered I lived in. The transparent tape was gone, the red case too, but on my coffee table was something new. A photo I'd never seen before. Me, Mom, and Dad at a Blockbuster in '99. All of us smiling. All of us together. All of us unaware of the spaces between. I flipped it over. On the back, in handwriting I didn't recognize, the only late fee that matters is the time you don't spend with the people you love. Sarah, manager, store number 2847. I put the photo on my fridge. Called Mom to say goodnight. Then called Dad for the first time in 3 years. We talked until dawn. But here's the thing. And this is why I'm telling you this story. Why I need you to listen carefully and maybe check your own junk drawer or that box in your closet you haven't opened since your last move. This morning, I found something. A membership card, not Blockbuster. Different. Red and white instead of blue and yellow. The logo is familiar but wrong, like looking at a friend's face in a dream. Hollywood Video, it says across the top. My name printed below. The expiration date is tomorrow, and written in pen across the bottom, in handwriting I now recognize as Sarah's. Every ending is just another beginning. Some stores never really close, they just change management. So I'm asking you, begging you really, check your old things. Look for membership cards to places that shouldn't exist anymore. Because if you find one, if you have any late fees, if you've ever rented something and aren't absolutely certain you returned it, pay attention to the calls from unknown numbers. Watch for vans that shouldn't exist. And whatever you do, be kind. Rewind. Sweet dreams. And don't forget to subscribe. You never know when the next notice might arrive, or what store it might be from. The spaces between are full of things we've borrowed and forgotten to return. Check the comments. Tell me what you found. We might not be alone in this. The late fees are adding up. And somewhere, in a store that doesn't exist, Sarah is pulling the next tape from the permanent collection. This time, it has your name on it. Story number 2. They found Marcus's camera 3 weeks after he disappeared. The memory card was still intact. Corrupted in places, but intact What we saw in that footage changed everything we thought we knew about urban exploring in Detroit. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what really happens when you break the rules. The unspoken rules that every Detroit explorer knows, or should know. Before I continue, hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more stories like this. Stories that'll make you question every abandoned building you've ever walked past. And stick around till the end, because what happened to Marcus, well, it's still happening. Story begins now. My name is Jake. I've been exploring abandoned buildings in Detroit for 6 years now. Started when I was 22, fresh out of Michigan State. Couldn't find a job that paid enough to move out of my parents' basement in Ferndale. So I started a YouTube channel. Urban exploration was trending, and Detroit was a goldmine of forgotten places. The Packard plant, Michigan Central Station, the old Fisher Body plant. I'd hit them all. Built up a decent following too, about 40,000 subscribers. Nothing huge, but enough to make some side money. Enough to justify spending my weekends crawling through broken windows and dodging security. That Tuesday in October started like any other. I was editing footage from the weekend, a solo exploration of an old elementary school on the east side. My phone buzzed. Instagram DM from someone called Detroit Rules Keeper. You've been chosen for something special. Exclusive access to the Branson Hotel tomorrow night, 11 p.m. Bring 2 others who understand the rules. The Branson Hotel. Every Detroit explorer knew about it, but nobody talked about it. Not really. It had been sealed since 1987, not just boarded up, but actually sealed. Concrete blocks, welded steel plates, the works. The city spent more keeping people out of that building than they did on half the schools still operating. I screenshot the message and sent it to my group chat. Within minutes, Marcus and Lily responded. Marcus was a photographer, been exploring longer than any of us. Lily was newer, maybe 6 months in, but she had good instincts. She knew when something felt wrong. This is sketchy as hell, Lily texted. It's the Branson, Marcus replied. When are we going to get another chance? He was right. The Branson was legendary. Built in 1924, closed after a fire in 1987 that killed 17 people. The official report blamed faulty wiring, but the survivors, the few who would talk, they told different stories. Stories about things moving in the walls. Voices in empty rooms. One woman swore she saw her daughter, who'd died 3 years earlier, standing at the end of a hallway, beckoning her deeper into the smoke. We met at a Coney Island on Woodward Avenue the next evening. Marcus brought his new camera, some expensive DSLR he'd been bragging about for weeks. Lily had her backpack full of the usual: flashlights, batteries, first aid kit, protein bars. I had my GoPro strapped to my chest and my phone ready for backup footage. So, what do we know about Detroit Rules Keeper? Lily asked, picking at her fries. Nothing, I admitted. Profile was created yesterday, no posts, no other followers. Probably just some urban explorer with connections. Marcus said, maybe someone who works for the city, has access to keys or something. We drove separately to the location. The message had included GPS coordinates, not an address. They led us to an alley off Grand River Avenue, about 3 blocks from where the Branson should have been. But when we turned the corner, the hotel was there. But it wasn't where it should have been. I knew these streets. I'd driven them hundreds of times. The Branson was supposed to be on the other side of the highway, near the old train station. But here it stood. All 14 stories of it, looking exactly like the old photographs. Red brick darkened with decades of Detroit weather. Windows black as pitch. and the entrance. The main entrance that should have been sealed with concrete. It was just boarded up, fresh plywood, like it had been put up yesterday. "This isn't right," Lily whispered. "The coordinates have to be wrong," Marcus said, but he was already getting his camera out. "Maybe they moved it for the message, to throw people off." I wanted to agree with him, wanted to believe there was a logical explanation. But standing there, looking up at those dark windows, I felt something I'd never felt before in 6 years of exploring. I felt like the building was looking back. The plywood over the entrance had been cut, a neat rectangle, just big enough for a person to squeeze through. Fresh sawdust on the ground. Someone had been here recently. Very recently. Marcus went first, then me, then Lily. The moment we crossed the threshold, our flashlights dimmed. Not dead, just dimmer. Like the darkness inside was thicker somehow, heavier. The lobby was perfect. That's the only word for it. Perfect, not restored, not renovated. Perfect, like it had never aged. The marble floor gleamed. The chandelier, all 1,000 crystals of it, hung pristine from the painted ceiling. Even the air smelled wrong. Not musty or moldy like every other abandoned building. It smelled like furniture polish and fresh flowers. "Guys," Lily's voice was barely a whisper. "Look at the dust." There was dust on everything, a thick layer of it. But our footprints weren't leaving marks. The dust moved around our feet like water, flowing back to cover where we'd stepped. That's when we saw the sign. Brass plaque on the wall next to the old elevators. It hadn't been there in any of the historical photos. I would have remembered. The Detroit Ruins. Rules 1. Never explore alone after midnight. 2. Always leave the way you came. 3. Don't touch the photographs. If you hear your name, don't answer. 5. The 5th floor doesn't exist. 6. Trust your shadow. 7. Break the rules. Join the ruins. "This is someone's art project," Marcus said, but he was filming everything. "Has to be some elaborate installation." "In an abandoned hotel that shouldn't be here?" Lily asked. "Buildings don't move." Lily. But even as he said it, we all knew something was deeply wrong. The elevator doors were brass, polished to a mirror shine, in the reflection. The lobby behind us was different, ruined, burned, exactly how it should have looked after 37 years. We took the stairs. The carpet was burgundy with gold patterns, thick enough that our footsteps made no sound. On each landing, there were photographs, black and white portraits in gilded frames, all of them showing the same thing, the hotel, but from angles that didn't make sense. Views from inside the walls, from under the floors, from above the ceilings, looking down through invisible gaps at people in old-fashioned clothes, walking through hallways, sitting in rooms, completely unaware they were being watched. "Don't touch the photographs," Lily reminded us. 2nd floor was hotel rooms, doors all closed but not locked. We opened 3. Each room was perfectly preserved but wrong. In one, a tea service was set for 4, steam still rising from the cups. In another, a radio played static that almost sounded like voices. In the 3rd, the bed was made, but the shape under the covers, it was too long and too still. 3rd floor, more rooms. One door was open, inside. Someone had written on the walls. Not graffiti, names, hundreds of names in neat handwriting, all dated. Sarah Chen, October 3rd, 1907. Michael Torres, November 15th, 1991. Jennifer Brown, March 22nd, 98. The dates went on. 2005, 2010, 2015, the last one. David Kim, October 10th, 2024. That was 2 weeks ago. We should go, Lily said. Now. Just a bit more. Marcus was in full photographer mode. This is incredible footage. 4th floor. The hallway was longer than it should have been. I'd studied the blueprints of this place. The building was only so wide, but this hallway stretched on and on. Doors every 10 feet on both sides. We walked for 5 minutes and hadn't reached the end. Stop. I grabbed Marcus's arm. Look back. The stairway we'd come from was gone. Just more hallway, stretching in both directions, endless doors, endless burgundy carpet. We went straight, Marcus said. The stairs have to be. That's when we heard it. Footsteps, above us. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. But we were on the 4th floor, and rule number 5, the 5th floor doesn't exist, Lily whispered. The footsteps stopped directly overhead. Then a voice, my voice, but I wasn't speaking. Jake, it called from above. Jake, come up, everyone's waiting. Marcus was the first to notice his shadow. It wasn't following him properly. When he moved left, it hesitated like it was thinking. When he raised his arm, the shadow's arm moved a second too late. Trust your shadow, Lily quoted. What does that even mean? The voice above, my voice, but not my voice, kept calling. Not just my name now. It knew things, private things. Jake, remember when you broke into the Silver Dome? Remember what you found in the owner's box? You never told anyone about that. It was right. I'd never told anyone about the photograph I'd found. A picture of the Silver Dome, taken from above, from an impossible angle, showing the roof transparent, showing me inside, finding the photograph of myself, finding the photograph. How does it know that? Marcus asked. We need to find stairs. I said, any stairs? Down? But every door we opened now led to the same thing. A staircase going up, only up. All of them led to a landing with a brass number 5. The 5th floor doesn't exist, Lily kept saying. It doesn't exist, so we can't go there. Then where do the stairs go? Marcus asked. His shadow suddenly jerked, pulled away from him completely, and ran down the hallway. Marcus screamed, not from pain, but from something worse. The moment his shadow left, he started fading, not disappearing, but becoming less real, less there. Marcus! Lily grabbed his arm, but her hand went partially through him. Follow it, I shouted. Trust your shadow. Follow it. We ran, Marcus stumbling, becoming more translucent with each step. His shadow was moving with purpose now, leading us through a door we'd already checked. But this time, instead of stairs going up, it was a room, a massive ballroom that couldn't possibly fit in the building's footprint. The room was full of people, all of them translucent like Marcus was becoming, all of them missing their shadows. They were dancing, or trying to, moving to music we couldn't hear, their faces blank, their eyes unfocused. Marcus's shadow stood in the center of the room, waiting. Go to it, I told him. Quick. He stumbled forward, and the moment he reached his shadow, it reattached. Color flooded back into him, solidity. He gasped like he'd been drowning. We're leaving, Lily said. Now, we find the exit and the translucent dancers all stopped, turned toward us. One of them stepped forward. David Kim, according to his name tag, October 10th, 2024. You can't leave, he said, his voice like wind through empty rooms. Not until you go to the 5th floor. Everyone has to go to the 5th floor. It doesn't exist, Lily said firmly. David smiled, a horrible, empty smile. Exactly. The lights went out. Complete darkness. Even our flashlights died, in the black. I heard Marcus scream, heard Lily calling my name, and then nothing. I woke up on the 5th floor. I knew it was the 5th floor because the brass number on the wall said so. But Lily was right. It didn't exist. Not in any way that made sense. The floor was wrong, sometimes carpet, sometimes marble, sometimes dirt. The walls shifted between wallpaper, bare brick, and occasionally, nothing at all. Just views into other rooms, other floors, other times. Marcus was there, sitting against a wall that kept cycling between different decades of decay. His camera was still recording. "Where's Lily?" I asked. He pointed down the hall. She was standing at a window, looking out. But when I reached her, I saw what she was looking at. We weren't looking out. We were looking into another room, where 3 people were exploring. 3 people who looked exactly like us, making the same choices, having the same conversations. "How long have we been here?" she asked. I checked my phone. Dead. Marcus's camera display showed an error where the timestamp should be. "Time doesn't work here," a voice said behind us. We turned. An old man in a maintenance uniform. Name tag said Reynolds. He looked normal except for his eyes. They reflected too much, like there were rooms behind them. "You broke the rules," he said simply. "Came after midnight, touched the photographs, answered when it called your name, and now you're here, the 5th floor that doesn't exist. Where all rule breakers go. We didn't touch any photographs," I protested. Reynolds laughed, pointed at Marcus's camera. "You've been taking photographs the whole time. Every picture you take in the ruins becomes part of the ruins. Didn't anyone ever tell you that?" Reynolds led us through the 5th floor, through rooms that were sometimes burned, sometimes pristine, sometimes full of people from different eras all existing at once. A 1920s flapper passed through Marcus like he was the ghost. A child from the 1950s played jacks in a corner, the ball bouncing up but never coming down. The Branson Hotel, Reynolds explained, was built on a threshold. The architects knew. They designed it to be a door, but doors work both ways. He showed us a room full of filing cabinets. Each drawer contained rules, different rules for different years. 1924 to 1940. Don't whistle in the hallways. Stay out of room 1408. Never take the elevator during a thunderstorm. 1940 to 1960. The basement is off limits. If you see wet footprints, follow them backwards. The woman in the red dress doesn't exist. 1960 to 1987. Don't look in the mirrors after 3 a.m. The 7th floor is safe, but the 9th floor isn't. If the walls bleed, it's Tuesday. After the fire, after they sealed it, the rules changed, became simpler, more desperate. Because the hotel was hungry, sealed up, it couldn't feed the proper way. So it started calling to people like you, urban explorers, thrill seekers, people who would break the rules. "Feed?" Lily asked. Reynolds gestured to the translucent dancers we'd seen. "Every person who breaks the rules becomes part of the hotel, not dead, not alive, just here forever. The hotel feeds on their existence, their possibility, their stories. But you're not translucent," I pointed out. "I never broke the rules." Reynolds smiled sadly. "I wrote them. I was the night manager in 1987. I knew what this place was. Tried to keep people safe when the fire started. It wasn't faulty wiring. The hotel was angry. 17 people died because they didn't follow the rules. And I stayed. Someone has to maintain the rules, update them, send them out. You're Detroit Rules Keeper," Marcus said. Reynolds nodded. Every few weeks. I send out invitations. The hotel needs fresh stories, fresh possibilities. And there are always those who can't resist, who think the rules don't apply to them. So we're trapped here. Lily's voice was surprisingly calm. Not trapped. Reynolds walked to a window. A real window this time, showing the actual Detroit skyline. There's always a way out, but it requires understanding the real rule, the one that matters. He turned to us. The rules aren't meant to keep you safe. They're meant to be broken. The hotel doesn't want obedient guests. It wants rule breakers. But there's one rule that actually matters. One that's never written down. What rule? I asked. The hotel can only keep you if you believe you're really here. I thought about that. Looked at Marcus. Still filming. At Lily. Taking notes even now. At myself. Standing in an impossible place. We never entered the hotel, I said slowly. It was in the wrong place. Buildings don't move. The 5th floor flickered. We're not here, Lily added. Catching on, we can't be on a floor that doesn't exist. The walls began to shift, showing other times, other places. This is just another abandoned building in Detroit, Marcus said. Lowering his camera, just another empty place, nothing special. Reynolds smiled, a genuine smile this time. Now you understand. The hotel has power because people give it power. They believe in the mystery, the danger, the romance of urban decay, but strip that away, and it's just empty rooms and broken promises. The 5th floor shuddered, cracked, and suddenly we were in a different place, the real Branson Hotel. Burned, ruined, exactly as it should be. We were on the 4th floor, the actual 4th floor. Our flashlights worked. Our phones had signal. Reynolds was gone, but on the wall. Someone had spray-painted a message. Fresh paint, still wet. Thanks for playing. Come back soon. DRK. We left immediately. Didn't stop. Didn't look back. Didn't film anything else. Found the exit exactly where it should have been. Our cars were parked outside, covered in dust like they'd been there for hours. Marcus's camera. When we reviewed the footage, it showed 3 hours of static, nothing else. My GoPro was the same. Lily's notes were blank pages. But I remember, we all remember. Marcus stopped urban exploring after that night. Deleted his Instagram, sold his camera. Lily still explores, but never in Detroit. Never anywhere with rules. But it wasn't that simple. Nothing ever is when you've been somewhere that doesn't exist. Marcus called me 3 days later, his voice shaking. Jake, I think I'm still there. I wake up and for a moment, I don't know which room I'm in, my apartment or one of those hotel rooms, and my shadow, it's always a half second behind now, always. Lily started having dreams. Dreams where she was writing names on walls, names of people who hadn't disappeared yet, people who were still living their normal lives, unaware that their names were already carved into the walls of a building that didn't exist. I dreamed about a woman named Patricia Gonzalez. She told me over coffee 2 weeks later. October 30th, 2024. That's next week. Jake, what if it's not over? What if we brought something back with us? I tried to tell her it was just trauma, post-exploration anxiety. All urban explorers get it sometimes. That sense that the buildings are following you home. But then I started noticing things. My editing software would sometimes show footage I hadn't taken, glimpses of hallways I'd never walked down, rooms I'd never entered, always deleted by the time I tried to look closer. But I'd see them, just for a frame or two, and the comments on my videos. Some of them were from accounts that had been created in the future, comments dated days or weeks ahead, all saying the same thing. The rules are spreading. I researched Patricia Gonzalez, found her Facebook, her Instagram, her LinkedIn. Normal woman. Worked in accounting. Lived in a suburb of Chicago. Never posted anything about urban exploration. Never expressed interest in abandoned buildings. But on October 30th, her social media went silent. I called the Chicago PD, reported her missing. They told me she'd been reported missing by her family that same day. Last seen leaving work, heading home. Never arrived. 3 days later, they found her car, parked outside the ruins of the Biograph Theater, a building that had been demolished in 2019, except according to the police report. The building was there, fully intact, like it had never been torn down. That's when I knew. The Detroit ruins rules weren't just about Detroit. They were spreading, moving from city to city, building to building, finding new places to take root. I started getting messages, DMs from accounts I didn't recognize. All variations of Rules Keeper, Chicago Rules Keeper, Boston Rules Keeper, Seattle Rules Keeper. Each message contained coordinates and rules. Different rules for different cities. The Chicago Ruins Rules. 1. Never explore during a blizzard. 2. The third floor is always Tuesday. 3. If you hear jazz music, run toward it. Never away. 4. Red doors lead home. Blue doors lead deeper. 5. The ghost of Mrs. O'Leary's cow guards the basement. Don't trust mirrors in October 7. Break the rules. Feed the city. The Boston Rules. 1. Tea leaves in the walls spell warnings. 2. Revolutionary ghosts only speak in riddles. The harbor calls but never answers. 4. Count the bells. If there are 13, leave 5. Freedom Trail leads everywhere except freedom. 6. Paul Revere rides at 3 a.m. sharp. Break the rules. Join the revolution. Each set was different, but rule number 7 was always the same. Always that invitation, that dare. I realized Reynolds had lied, or maybe he'd only told us part of the truth. The hotel wasn't feeding on rule breakers. It was creating them, using them as seeds to spread to other cities, other buildings. Every urban explorer who'd entered the Branson and made it out. We weren't survivors. We were carriers. Marcus called me again last week. Said he'd been walking through downtown Detroit and suddenly found himself in Chicago, standing in front of the rebuilt Biograph Theater, with no memory of traveling there, no memory of getting on a plane or in a car, just there. The building was open. He told me. Fresh plywood over the entrance, cut in a perfect rectangle, and I could hear jazz music coming from inside. Real music, not static. And Jake, I wanted to go in. I wanted to break the rules. But you didn't, I said, silence on the line for a long moment. Then Marcus laughed, a sound I'd never heard from him before. Empty, like wind through broken windows. Who says I didn't? The line went dead. I tried calling back. Number disconnected. I haven't heard from Marcus since, but sometimes, when I'm editing videos late at night, I see his shadow in the reflection of my monitor, standing behind me, pointing at the screen, at footage of buildings I've never visited, in cities I've never been to. Part 6. The Network. The rules are evolving, spreading faster now. I track the missing persons reports, urban explorers, photographers, YouTubers, all disappearing near abandoned buildings that shouldn't exist, or buildings that exist when they shouldn't. Los Angeles, the Ambassador Hotel, demolished in 2006, but explorers are posting videos from inside it, fresh videos, dated this year. The hotel lobby pristine, the ballroom where Bobby Kennedy was shot, somehow untouched by time. The Los Angeles Rules one, stars on the floor point to exits. 2. Room 928 is always occupied. Don't photograph the ballroom. If the earthquake sirens sound, it's already too late. 5. The ambassador never checks out. 6. Dreams are just unfilmed movies. Break the rules. Join the show. New York. The original Penn Station. Torn down in 1963. But there are Instagram posts, fresh posts, from inside the waiting room, the concourse, the cathedral-like ceilings that were lost to progress decades ago. The New York rules. 1. All trains arrive on track. 13. 2. The information board lies on purpose. 3. Grand Central is the decoy. If you hear Sinatra, you're in the wrong decade. 5. The city that never sleeps has nightmares. Every platform leads to somewhere else. 7. Break the rules. Become the underground. I've stopped making regular urban exploration videos. Now I document the rules, track the pattern, try to warn people. But who's going to believe a story about buildings that move? About abandoned places that abandon reality? My subscriber count has dropped to 12,000. The algorithm doesn't like content that questions the nature of existence. But the people who stay, the people who keep watching, they understand. They see their shadows hesitating too. Lily disappeared last month. I got one text from her, just coordinates and a timestamp. The coordinates led to the ruins of Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia, a place that's been a tourist attraction for years. But when I looked it up, according to city records, it had been demolished in 2021, except it wasn't demolished, it was there, offering guided tours, selling merchandise, acting like it had always been a normal historical site. But the timestamp on Lily's message, it was dated 6 months in the future. I drove to Philadelphia, found the penitentiary exactly where it should be. Normal, touristy, safe. But after closing time, when the tour groups were gone and the staff had left, I saw the other entrance, the one that shouldn't exist, cut into the wall like an afterthought, fresh plywood. You know the drill by now. I didn't go in, but I could hear voices from inside. Familiar voices. Marcus, Lily, others I didn't recognize, all of them talking at once, overlapping, sharing stories about buildings that didn't exist and rules that couldn't be broken. And underneath it all, Reynolds' voice. Not just one Reynolds now, but many. A network of keepers, managing an ever-growing collection of impossible places. Every city has its ruins, they chanted in unison. Every ruin has its rules. Every rule is meant to be broken. Every broken rule feeds the network. I backed away, got in my car, drove straight home. But in my rearview mirror, I saw something that made my blood freeze. The penitentiary was following me, not physically, not literally. But every time I passed an abandoned building, it looked a little more like Eastern State. Every derelict house, every closed factory, every empty strip mall, they all had that same Gothic architecture. Those same imposing walls. The rules weren't just spreading to famous buildings anymore. They were spreading to everything. Every abandoned place becoming part of the network. Every empty building becoming a potential door. I'm documenting this because I think I'm next. My shadow has been acting strange for weeks now. Sometimes it moves before I do, like it knows where I'm going before I decide. And the buildings, God, the buildings are everywhere now, even my own house, when I'm not looking directly at it. I can see it in my peripheral vision. Abandoned, boarded up, with fresh plywood cut into a perfect rectangle over the front door. The network is complete, or nearly complete. Every city, every abandoned building. All connected now. All following the same 7 rules. with the same promise, the same threat. Break the rules, join the ruins. If you're still watching, if you made it this far, check your shadow. Right now. Is it doing exactly what you're doing, or is there a slight delay, a moment of hesitation? Because once you notice it, once you really see it, you can't unsee it. And that's when you'll understand. The Detroit Ruins rules aren't just about Detroit. They're everywhere. In every abandoned place you've ever been curious about, waiting for someone to break them. Comment below if your shadow is acting normal. But more importantly, bet on comment if it isn't. Because if it isn't, well, you might want to check what city you're actually in right now. The buildings have been moving a lot lately. Don't forget to subscribe if you're still you, and hit that notification bell if your shadow lets you, because next week, if there is a next week, I'm going to tell you about the final rule. The rule that's never written down. The rule that explains why some people come back, and others become the buildings themselves. Sweet dreams. And remember, rule number 6, always trust your shadow. Unless it's not yours anymore. Unless it's leading you somewhere you've already been. Unless it's leading you home to a place that doesn't exist yet.